Region Europe is the international program of the University of Turin, pursuing a comprehensive knowledge of the European model of regional integration and of the EU as a global actor. The involvement of 45 guest lecturers coming from all across the world's most prestigious universities and institutions allows us to bring fresh and critical perspectives on crucial issues concerning European integration and the role of the EU in world affairs, with a forward-looking approach. We want to introduce you to how the EU actually works from its beating heart, visiting its institutions and interacting with its actors. From its first edition, each year Region Europe has given the opportunity to more than 150 students coming from all over the world to gather and exchange views and experiences.
Again, I think Sam followed Professor greetings and good morning and good evening. Depends where you are, and welcome to join today's event. Thank you very much for Professor invitation, and I have been quite pleased and honored to join you. It's a wonderful program. Regional European Region Europe program. This is about external perception of European Union, and today I think I will trying to look into China-EU relations, and I think I will mention a little bit how the Chinese people perceive the European Union as a whole, and also, but not simply the how into the European Union, and also I was trying to think about the China-EU relations from a perception perspective or a normative perspective. So I would share my screen and to have my PPT. And also I think during my lecture, I think will be welcome for you guys to have questions during my lecture, and if you don't have questions during the lecture, but we may have a Q&A sessions a little later. So I will talk a little bit like 45 minutes to 1 hour, and also afterward I think I will trying to have Q&A sessions. So let's move a little bit forward with my my talk. So my talk is about internal external norm of kind of user engagement, or let me say kind of normative interaction between China and EU. Why I trying to look at this issue, and I trying to think about something like the puzzle.
Okay, something doesn't work. So many of you are writing that you cannot hear very well. Okay, Elisa, can you jump in, please? And ask.
Yeah, it's just that Professor Fudan is maybe having some problems with this connection. And I'm just gonna stop his sharing for the moment. So yeah, really.
Yeah. Yeah, do it. But we have
okay.
some. I think. Not clearly. That's the problem. That
actually. So
is that okay? If I share my screen and talk now? Because I'm not sure.
So maybe we can ask Professor Pan to disconnect. Yes, you can do it. You can do it, but yeah. So let's try to. So I would suggest to try to turn off your cameras, dear students. So I don't like it, but you know, let's try
I leave the
in this
meeting
way.
and come back again.
Yeah, try disconnect to
Okay.
reconnect.
So
Please,
let me
Professor,
leave
so
the
that
meeting and
maybe
come
we
back.
can solve the connection. If you have any other router,
Yeah.
Oh, is that okay? Can you hear me now? I think, yeah, I think I have a, I'm trying to look into the relations from a, because I think we have a, I have a lot of noise in, so, okay. So I'm trying to look into China-EU relations and, can you hear me now? Is anything wrong? Okay. So,
No, but what's the problem? So you hear noises or what else?
No, I hear a lot of noise in the background. But okay, I was trying to look into, I'm trying to go ahead. So, because I'm not so sure everyone can hear very clearly, because the connection sometimes is not so reliable. And because of coronavirus, it's very difficult for we get together in this style. So many people talk about the rise of China challenge to the current world order or to international relations. So in what sense China poses a kind of a challenge? Sometimes people talk about in terms of power, because power, China is rising power, but some other people, some other times talk about norms, because China also present different norms or different preference for international relations. So I'm trying to ask a question like this puzzle. We have a very close connection between China and European relations, and so many people quite trying to ask why it's so difficult for the European norm to be accepted by the China side, and why the question for me is that China rejects some European norms but accept others. So the question is that why China rejects some norms of European side but accept others. So people trying to provide a few reasons to explain this phenomenon. For example, people will say we have a normative divergence because European norms are very different from what China favors, like different norms that we share. And also China's rising power, because China it seems like that China becoming more powerful and more difficult for China to buy into the European ideas. But also some people argue that the European foreign policy toward China is misguided. We should have a more offensive or more defensive strategy toward China. So then probably China is more likely to be socialized into the European norm. But I think it's probably those regions are not sufficient, because even though we have a normative divergence, China's rising power, the European misguided strategies, but we still have a phenomenon difficult to explain. Why some norm China favors, why some other norm China refuse to accept. For example, we have human rights and multilateralism, but probably it's difficult to tell liberty and freedom and other things. So we do have some issue between China and EU. But why this case? So far, I think very few people really look into norm themselves. So I'm trying to look into what about norm themselves, because when we trying to understand why China does not accept European norms, we don't ask what norm China really accepts, what norm China does not accept. So if we look into norms themselves, we may find the answer. So that's why I'm trying to differentiate norm into different categories. We know norm is kind of the idea, tell us what behavior is considered appropriate. So people may follow norms in different social contexts. Norm is very important because norm has been defined as a kind of idea about appropriate behavior. Norm has a kind of a dual characters in that they do not only prescribe what appropriate behavior you should do, but also constitute actors' identities. So norms are therefore both regulative and constitutive. So that's why I think norms themselves are very important. But if we go to further from norms themselves, I would differentiate into different kind of category, in kind of dichotomy between internal external norms. The norm, I think, is very different if we live in different societies. Very much depend on society. For example, today we have a coronavirus, and you can find many people will have different ways to deal with coronavirus, given their different social background. For example, probably you may not happy with the case, because in China, I think many Chinese people will take a face mask. I think they believe this is very much a kind of social norm. We agree with the government advice, and also we keep social distancing. But in Western society, probably also the case in Italy or other European countries, people may dislike to wear a face mask, even though they also stand by the social distancing. So I think these social norms are very much have different social connotations. So that's why I think when we think about we talk about relation between nation state or state of unions. So when we think about the actors, like states, they may have different norms internally and externally. Internal norm, I mean, is the kind of norm how a state, a government should deal with internal issues in domestic politics. External norms means that a country, how they should deal with other countries or deal with international affairs, international issues. So I think it's a kind of that distinctions between internal and external dimensions. If we go ahead, I think let's look into what's internal and what's external norm. A society, internal norm is that how a country, a state, a government to deal with internal issues. For example, we talk about good governance. That means the government should have a good governance with domestic issues. And we also talk about democracy, human rights, and stability. Those are a few examples. Tell us how a state should, what social society behavior should be regarded kind of appropriate. So I think this is kind of internal norms. So internal define what's regarded appropriate behavior of nation states in domestic governance. So there's a few examples. And also, I think if we, by contrast, look into external norms, there's a few examples. Responded to protect. So those norms tell us a kind of a behavior of, say, in social arena. So that's, I think, is very different social context may have different social norms. So that's why we may have a very different understandings or norms. So this I think it's a kind of dichotomy between internal and external norms. So I think I would say this kind of a differentiation between internal and external norms are very much reasonable, and also I think probably is valid because they apply in different social contexts. For internal norms, its social context is definitely defined by a national society, and it's very much different from one country to another country. Like we talk about democratic country or non-democratic country. But no matter democracy or not, every nation state, every national society, there's a kind of a hierarchical structure. We have a centralized authority about local authorities. Now we have a central government, local government, province, state. Today we have a very important event happening in the United States, as U.S. election. So people are counting, and it's difficult still to tell who will win the U.S. election. But anyway, we know there are 50 states in the United States. The federal government is centralized authority, and every state are local government. So we have a hierarchical structure in every state. But for external norms, the social context is very different because we are living in international arena, international society. In international society, we are every country are a sovereign country. Sovereignty means that we don't have centralized authority above nation states. So that we call anarchy. So anarchy means very different social context compared with domestic politics. In domestic politics, it's a hierarchical structure. But in international society, it's kind of an anarchical structure. So no centralized authority above nation state. So that's why we may have very different social norms regulating how states should behave internally, externally. So that's why I'm trying to differentiate internal norms from external norms. If we agree this kind of differentiation as kind of a framework of analysis, and then we can go ahead to look into how the norms. So, but before I think I want to a little bit emphasize that we may have some norms. We may have some norms cross the border between internal and external. For example, good governance is originally is kind of for internal norms, but today gradually people talk about global good governance or good global governance. So good governance gradually becoming kind of for external norms. So peace is external norm, but also we talk about domestic peace. So they may have some norms crossing border, maybe belong to both internal and external. This is very makes things very complicated. I think by contrast, the US trying to define a norm as kind of regulative ideas and cultures, and also the constitutive ideas. But the European side usually don't differentiate different social contexts. And also they would not talk about internal external norm. They simply put international before the norm. So many norms that the European side talk about today, it's not really international norm, but simply internal norms. So this, I think, is very much different from China's side. China takes sovereignty as a norm because China believes we have internal aspect of sovereignty and also external aspect of sovereignty. So probably this is why we, the Chinese side, really favor kind of differentiation between internal and external norms. So norms for states, we may talk about national norms and international norms, but they are not the same. They're not the same. So that's why I think we have very different understandings over norms between the Chinese people and the European side. So that's, I think, bring a lot of trouble to China and the EU. But before we talk about engagement, I want to compare the Chinese norm perception and normative resources, and also the European side a little bit before we go ahead. So let's look at the European norms. This is the European internal norms. So this, I think, is a kind of a very important scholar, Ivan Manners, from University of Copenhagen, and he's trying to talk about that the European Union as kind of a normative power. I think it's a very famous slogan and also quite famous studies by academic people. And today, gradually, European Union describes itself as kind of a normative power. So he differentiates major norms and minor norms. The major one including 5. Left side is major norms, and the right side is minor norms. Peace, liberty, democracy, rule of law, and human rights are major norms that Europeans trying to advocate. And social solidarity, anti-discrimination, and sustainable development, good governance. This, I think, is a kind of a minor norms that are advocated by European side. But I think, unfortunately, Ivan Manners does not differentiate internal, external norms. He simply, I don't know why he's trying to differentiate by major or minor. Probably he thinks so-called major have major influence over the European internal governance and external for relations than the minor ones. So probably this his approach. But I think he missed a lot of other norms, like I argue is external norms. For example, we know peace has been a kind of norm almost accepted by everyone. But we know Europeans have other norms like effective multilateralism. I suppose today we have many audience from the European side, and if you're from European side, you may be more familiar with this slogan. It's effective multilateralism. It's a very much European norm and even a very important principle for the European foreign policy. So in different occasions, European politicians and high officials will talk about this effective multilateralism, the guidelines of European foreign policy. But unfortunately, Ivan Manners and other scholars do not include this principle or this norm into their studies. And also we have a R2P principle, or we may call it humanitarian intervention. And this has been strongly humanitarian intervention. It's also a external norm that has been advocated and supported by the European side. So that's why I think we have internal norms and external norms from European perspective. Okay, so I think if we look at into China, may talk about a few things like we have a very much internal norms and external norms. China very much favor unification, or we call reunification, because we have a Taiwan issue. We may don't have time to go to detail, but we know Taiwan is claimed as part of China, but people in Taiwan believe they are very much different political entities. So we favor unification, and we also quite care about stability, and internal stability very much a important issue from China's point of view. And China also asks for harmonious society and development. Those important guidelines for domestic politics and domestic governance. So look into China external norms. We may be familiar with the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. And I think it's a very important principle that has been proposed by China side in the 1950s, along with India and Myanmar, to deal with the issue between China, Myanmar, China, India, but also the relation between other major countries, both developing and developed countries. So we believe we should live in together peacefully, and we should not interfere into each other. So we may be familiar with non-interference, but actually non-interference is one principle of the 5. And also China asks for multipolarity, because China believes a multipolar world is better than unipolar world or bipolar world to bring peace and stability and development to the whole world. And also China have some slogans you may not very familiar with, but I think if you pay attention to China foreign policy, you may think about this: harmonious world like harmonious society. Harmonious society indicating how a government, Chinese government, should deal with internal issues, and harmonious world how China is trying to project a kind of vision to the whole world. And also we argue for democratization of international relations. So that's why I think people believe, the Chinese people believe, we should negotiate, we should talk, we should deal with international issues without confrontation and competition. And also the latest Chinese government asked for a kind of a human community with a shared future. I don't know whether you're familiar with this. In Chinese, 人类命运共同体, probably difficult to translate into English. But anyway, this is official translation, mankind community with shared future. So it's also a actual norm that guides China foreign policy, and also China belief. This should be a norm should abide by every state in the world. So I think this we have very different internal actual norm between China and the EU. Then I think if we continue compare a little bit to think why we have very different understanding of norm, but also the influence. So you may think of the mindset, because the mindset is different between way of thinking. The Chinese ways of thinking, European way of thinking are different. So when we talk about normative power, many people may think about European Union, because European Union has claimed itself as kind of normative power, and this has been very much received, except by even many other countries around the world, including China, but many others. So in I think in 2015, about 5 years ago, the European Commission supported a very big project to look into how the European 10 strategic partners perceive the European Union, including one question: whether those 10 partner countries believe European Union is a normative power. So I'm very happy to join the China team, and I trying to ask the Chinese media and Chinese academic and also Chinese honor people, business people about this question. I think majority of Chinese people believe European Union is a kind of normative power. But there are one thing, that the European Union is not single normative power in the world. They also believe China is another one. If European is normative power, China is also normative power. But of course, it's very debatable. I think to some extent, we may argue that every nation state are normative power, or they may have normative power even though they are not qualified to name as a normative power as European did. So probably if we think about the difference normative power and the European normative power, we may have a few dimensions like resources and diffusion and influence. From European point of view, I think the European norms are very much means-oriented. That means that they try to talk about how we can achieve some goals. For example, we should have democracy, and democracy is kind of means, and human rights, responsible for human rights, and effective multilateralism, they are all means to achieve something. But it's not necessarily right or wrong, simply the way of thinking, because the European trying to emphasize on the means. They don't emphasize on the final goals, but the Chinese side were end-oriented, very much different. I will talk about the Chinese side. And also, I think in terms of norm diffusion, I think European Union are very proactive to diffuse norm, to expand its norm from European Union to other countries, both internal and external ones. And sometimes they even trying to Europeanize other countries. It's not, I think, globally, but at least for the other countries who want to join European Union, they must make themselves more like European countries, European member states. So we have very strict criteria for the candidate country to become full member of European Union. Some other countries who want to join the European Union, become a member of European Union, they need to follow those norms, and it's becoming quite similar in both internal and external norms as European Union. It's not only, I think, the European effort in diffusing its norm like locked in the European continent, but also globally, because I think the European also asked China to join, to accept the European norm, including democracy and I think the European has been very influential globally. So almost a majority of the people in the world believe that the European Union has been a normative power. At least I think we agree that European Union is very different from the United States. Even though the United States also have a normative power, but generally speaking, the United States is more likely to use its hard power or military power to achieve its foreign policy goals instead of a normative power. The European side maybe probably go quite different. The European side trying to achieve its foreign policy goals mainly by normative power other than military or hard power. So that's why I think we have very different foreign policy between United States and European Union. So European Union is quite proactive influencing other countries in a normative perspective, not only over China, but also over the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, so many Western countries as well. So the same story. So I think if we go ahead to look into China's side, China have very different mindset compared with European one, and the China side quite emphasize on the end, the final objective, final goals, because we have if European side quite emphasize, for example, democratic way to deal with internal issue, and also effective multilateralism to deal with international issue, but China quite emphasize the final result or final objective. So China argue for example, China do not specify how we can achieve a harmonious world. So China do not specify the exact ways or approach that we should follow to make the world into a harmonious situation, and also talk about the human community with shared future. The China side do not specify which ways or which approach we should follow to make a human community with shared future. So China do not really care about the means, or in other words, China may argue that we have many ways to go to the same destination. So the means does not really matter. The real matter thing is a final objective. So we have a slogan like "All roads lead to Roma." So all roads lead to Roma. We don't care about roads, but we care about final definition. That's Roma mindset. We care about the final objective, where we are heading to. So in this way, I think China is not very much normative power today, because China do not really diffuse its power to our other countries. China do not really talk about, for example, unification, reunification, even though China very favor this norm in domestic politics. But internationally, with other countries, China really do not ask other countries to follow the same style. Some countries may favor division or whatever, so have independence. For example, China favor European Union have regional integration, so we support European integration because we favor unification. But when the UK left the European Union, I think China many people feel unhappy, but they accept because this is an internal issue of European countries, not China's internal issue. But China has trying to diffuse some norms that I try to call kind of external norms, like non-interference. China believes non-interference should be a guideline not only for China foreign policy, but also should be a guideline for every country's foreign policy or guideline for international affairs. So I think that's very much different from United States or European Union. Because China does not diffuse internal norms, so we may argue that China does not want to Chinanize other countries. We don't try to make Japan, for example, or South Korea to become the second China, or even Singapore, very much Chinese people living in that country, but we don't try to make that country if we
no,
at least in some region. China has been called.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry because can you repeat the last few sentences, because we had some problems, so we couldn't hear you very well.
Yeah, he's having trouble with his connections. That's why the audio is a bit bad, and yeah, it's lagging a bit.
Let me repeat.
Okay, let's try again, Zhongqi.
Okay, you're coming from my side. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so now we can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm hearing now, very close now.
Okay.
But before that, it's very much broken. So I'm trying to tell you that the Chinese have quite emphasized on ends, final objective, but also China have been quite keen to diffuse external norms, but not internal norms. And also China have very little influence in terms of norm in today's world, even though China has been very powerful in the history, because China was a powerful normative power in East Asia. So if you think about that, many concepts, political values, political system in old Asian, ancient Asia, I think has been created by China's side. So I think diffused to other countries. So I think that's fair to argue that China used to be a very powerful normative power, but not anymore today. We cannot tell in the future. But anyway, if we compare between China and EU, and I ever say that European Union is a very powerful normative power today, China is not. So that's one thing. We have some issue between China and EU in their normative engagement. So I'm trying to look into our interaction between China and EU side, our internal norms and external ones. I would take a few examples like the EU side and on the China side. I think it's very much asymmetrical. It's like one-way street, because European Union trying to have a normative engagement with China side to ask China to proceed and human rights, and also leave the death penalty and many others. But China take a normative defense because we don't really agree with the European side. One important issue we should pay attention to the European side, that European side trying to make China foreign the US policy toward China in the human rights as mainstream. So I try to coin, I think, directly from the European documentation, the EU's policy paper to China in 1990s. So the EU argued that they want to support, encourage development of full, healthy, and independent civil society in China. At the same time, the EU will continue to encourage full respect of fundamental rights and freedom in all regions of China, freedom of speech, religions, and association, the right to a fair trial, and the protection of the minorities. So very much a kind of the European effort to diffuse its internal norm to China's side, including human rights, freedom of speech, religions, and association, and also the rule of law. And I think many things you can tell about this, the European trying to sell its norm to China's side. But China do not really like those norms. So we're trying to use sovereignty as kind of protection against human rights. So we accept a few norms, but refuse others. Like accept peace, system of development, but not otherwise. I think like democracy, because China is democracy. We may have very different democracy between China and European side. So China do not accept and also the and many others. But China argued that we have sovereignty because sovereignty is more important than human rights and other things. I will give you one example of the human rights issue and the sovereignty issue. They have very different understanding between European side and China side. That's Tibetan issue. So Tibetan issue, I think, has been quite important in 2008, 2009. So as introduced by Professor Finizio, I was seconded by the Chinese ministry to the European mission, and I happened to be in 2009. So China-EU relation has been very bad, mainly because Tibetan issue, because we have a very important protest in Lhasa in 2008. So many people from European side believe it's a kind of human rights issue. So they require the Chinese side should improve the human rights record in Tibet. But China argued that Dalai Lama and the Tibetan people divide the country. So we see the Tibetan issue as a sovereignty issue rather than a human rights issue. So we believe Dalai Lama trying to divide China. So the European people believe Dalai Lama trying to fight for the Tibetan's human rights. So that's why we have very different understanding over this issue. So that's why we have a lot of troubles between the two sides. But I would say, even the human rights issue, we have some improvement between China and EU. We have very long time human rights dialogue between two sides. Now we happen every twice a year, rotatingly in the European presidency. And we also have a lot of discussion between human rights issue. I want to mention one example is that in 2004, we have a constitution amendment by the China side. That's the first time China include the human rights clause into the constitution. That stipulate argue that the Chinese government respect and protect Chinese people's human rights, even though it's very empathy. But I think it's very symbolic to indicate that the Chinese government really cares about human rights, and we start to take care of Chinese human rights and pay attention to the norm of human rights. I think mainly it's because European pressure or European arguments. Because even though the United States also requires China to do more work to improve human rights, but anyway, I think my impression is that the United States does not care about China's human rights as European did, and we can have a very different argument or different policies from United States and European Union over China's human rights issue. So that's why I think the Chinese people may thank the European side to improve the human rights issue in China. I think This is very much improvement that on the internal engagement between China and EU. If we move forward to the external norm, we may have a very different story. I think much better story. It's also asymmetrical, but a very different from internal norms. It's a kind of two-way story. The EU trying to engage China with its external norm, but China also engage EU with its external norms. China still, I think, we may argue that EU take a very much offensive approach and China defensive, but the story has been very different from internal norms. The EU trying to ask China to support effective multilateralism as a principle of IR. So that's why I think that means that everything, when we talk about in international arena, we should have many countries to get together, have talk, discussion, negotiation, and then come to deal. Like we have a Paris Agreement over climate change. So that's to follow the principle of effective multilateralism. So EU asked China to accept, and also China, EU asked China to align with the European side to normalize humanitarian intervention based on the principle of R2P. So these, I think, the two examples what EU trying to diffuse to China's side of its external norms, effective multilateralism and R2P. Look what happened in China's side. China trying to persuade. I think on the one hand that China accept the European norm of multilateralism, and also China accept the R2P principle. Because even though, if we come back a little bit, if we ask the effective multilateralism, I think you can find that China foreign policy gradually support and endorse the multilateralism as a principle, not simply multipolarity, but also multilateralism. So I think the European side and China side can find some common language, agreement, consensus on this principle. And also China support R2P, even though it's not fully support, because I think this principle has been codified by the, I think 2005 Kofi Annan, the former UN General Secretary, he have a report, A Great Freedom, and in this report, he codified the principle of the R2P and also humanitarian intervention. And many countries signed and ratified this very important documentation, including China. So China supports this principle, but we have some reservations because we worry about some country may take R2P as a kind of practice to intervene in our countries. So we're trying to mitigate the R2P principle on the one hand and the China non-interference principle on the other hand. So that's why I think China accepts the principle to some extent. Look into China. China trying to persuade the EU, and its members say that we should respect sovereignty in their interventions. The principle of sovereignty, because China is a still sovereign country and very much different from European countries. Europeans trying to share and pool their sovereignty into a kind of a European Union. But we are very different. We're trying to solidify our sovereignty. We're trying to even reunify Taiwan. So we're trying to bring Taiwan back. So if we bring Taiwan back, we become a full country, full sovereign countries. Before that, I think China will continue to advocate and emphasize on the principle of sovereignty. And also, we ask for a multipolar world. I think China believes multipolar world is more desirable and conducive to peace than multipolarity and bipolarity. So we dislike unipolarity, like the United States become unipolar of the world, the Cold War, the end of Cold War, or the bipolarity during Cold War period between United States and Soviet Union. So that's why I think China favor a multipolar world, and I think this has been shared by many countries in Europe. I think France has been quite proactive to ask for multipolar world in the former few governments. And also China argued for a harmonious world should be achieved by democratization of IR. I think it's also very much China trying to elicit support from European side. We hope the European side can be a partner of China to make the world into a multipolar world, into a harmonious world. Like the European trying to align China to support the EU to make the world into a multilateral world or a world of peaceful and non-power world. That's, I think, we have some kind of commonality, consensus between China and EU side. So that's why I think, compared with internal norm engagement, China-EU engagement over external norm has been quite positive. So we have a lot of things to talk about the commonalities or progress that we have made. Come to the conclusion to think about what this discussion, this kind of research may imply for the China-EU relationship. I would say a few things like we have a normative divergence and normative convergence. So of course, when we talk about normative divergence, we have a very much a negative story to talk about, like a Tibetan issue, as I mentioned, but also we have other issues like Africa issue. The Chinese aid and European aid to Africa has been quite controversial. And also we have the enough sanctions over Iran because of Iranian nuclear issue. We have different understandings over this enough sanctions between China and EU, even though we have a very good cooperation in the comprehensive plan. We have a normative divergence, we have value gap, and also we have this value gap has been quite emphasized and enlarged by those different norms that we support. And also we have very much of policy confrontations. Like many people accuse China to divide the European Union because we support some country and against some country. But usually China supports some country because they don't have they don't invite Dalai Lama to visit, and we trying to country because this country invite Dalai Lama on the support Tibetan independence or Iran Xinjiang issue. And also we have a normative engagement between China and EU side. When the political value has been concerned, usually we have difficulty to get along between China and EU side. But also we think we may have a normative convergence. So we still have very much complementary aspect. For example, China asks for multipolarity and European asks for multilateralism. I think they are not contradictory to each other. Multipolar world and multilateralism is kind of complementary. I think as many people from side or from European side, they argue that multilateral is kind of approach to achieve multipolar world. And many other people argue that the multipolar world is a best guarantee for the principle of multilateralism. So that's why we may support each other and then make those principles, those norms are kind of complementary to each other. And also we have effective cooperation given the normative divergence. We have a very good cooperation over Iranian issue. And also we have a change issue. I think China signed and ratified the Paris Agreement over climate change issue a few years ago. So I think very much progress. And also I think we have very good strategic partnership between China and EU. China is one of the 10 strategic partners of the European Union. So I think from China's point of view, China's strategic partnership with the European Union is very important. And also, I think from European point of view, its partner with China is also very important. So one more implication for research, I think, is that we need to pay attention to this divergence and convergence between different norms. So different actors, including China and the European Union, have divergent, sometimes conflicting norms preferences. They are not only class over either internal or external norms are more important as guidelines of national behavior, but also class over which internal and external norms are most outstanding: human rights or sovereignty for internal norms, multipolarity or multilateralism for external norms. We have a different preference. So class of norms has been increasingly irritating in relation between China and the European Union. So I think it's very important for China side and European side. We should have mutual empathy, and we should have trying to have more meeting of minds other than the confrontation. Because if we look at the same issue from the other point of view, we may have a better understanding over this issue. For example, the coronavirus issue is very much the pandemic, very much a big issue nowadays facing the whole world. So how we understand China foreign policy, China policy to this issue, and how we understand European policy to this issue, we should put ourselves into opposite other side's position and then have a better understanding of the issue. So we may have more dialogue and more talk over those internal and external issues. Then we may gradually reduce the gap between the value gap between China and EU, and then have better understanding to each other, even though we cannot over become circles prevent China and EU to build a real strategic partnership. This issue today. I'm sorry for the broken voice and sometimes probably not so clear to everyone, but I will stop here and welcome your comments, questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Pan, for your wonderful speech, for your wonderful lecture, and for your wonderful conclusions as well. That is, meeting of minds is needed, and of course, this is what we are trying to do and to promote with this program and with other activities, of course. So thank you very much again, and now the floor is open to your questions and to your comments. I'm sorry for this technical problem, but it's that's a virtual life, so to speak. So I've already seen a question from somebody, from Enrico. So I'm going to read it because he cannot use the mic. So given that China is on paper in favor of harmonization of international relations, do you think that if Taiwan gives up on being recognized as China, but rather as its own sovereign state, Beijing government will give up on planning an invasion on the island as part of the plan to unify the country? Can you hear us, Professor? Can you hear us? Professor Pan, are you there? Can you hear us? Yeah. So the connection is not good, I guess. No, Taiwan. Yes, of course, Taiwan. Do you want me to read it again? Yeah, maybe it's better. Can you hear us? Yeah. And you?
I'm not sure I get questions about Taiwan become China, whether China make Taiwan Taiwan may have. Yeah.
No, no, Professor Pan, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear you. So we can wait a second, or because I think you are experiencing some problems with your connection, I guess.
Hong Kong was get back, returned to China in 1997. I think China supports this principle to Hong Kong, but China also argued that this principle also applicable to Taiwan. So if that principle applies, that means Taiwan will enjoy what Hong Kong has enjoyed today. But I think Taiwan may enjoy. So I think almost everything has been negotiable, except the sovereignty. I think it's very clear from China's point of view. If Taiwan agrees, there's only one China in the world, and the sovereignty belongs to.
No, I'm sorry, something doesn't work here.
Also, I think from the.
I'm sorry, Professor Pan, but no,
someone,
no. I'm sorry, but we couldn't understand anything of our answer. So that's the problem. So now I think we can hear you, because we can see you very well, and so I guess that we can hear you as well. So could you repeat your answer, please? I'm sorry, but you know.
No, I suppose the question is about if Taiwan has been give up this kind of a sovereignty claim, agreed to unify with mainland China, and what kind of status Taiwan may enjoy in the future China? My answer is that we have one China. I think it's one country, two systems. That's been proposed by Deng Xiaoping in 1980s, and then this principle has been applied to Hong Kong. Hong Kong returned from UK side to China side in 1991. So Hong Kong now enjoy one country, two systems. This principle means that we are one country. Hong Kong is part of China, but we have different political systems. The mainland China have the mainland China's political system, but Hong Kong has independent, very different political system. I think quite similar to the UK side. And if in the future Taiwan return to China, this principle will also applicable to Taiwan. So Taiwan may become a part of China following one China, one country, two system principle. But Taiwan even may enjoy more things than Hong Kong. Taiwan is important, very different from Hong Kong. My argument is that I think follow Deng Xiaoping and many political leaders' point of view, if Taiwan agree it's part of China, I think everything is negotiable. We can negotiate everything between mainland China and Taiwan. So it's not difficult to come a deal. So it's very flexible from mainland China point of view. If only we agree there's only one China, Taiwan and mainland are reunified. So I think this basically what I'm trying to answer the question from the audience.
So thank you. There is another question from Rebecca. It's about the concept of the democratization of international relations. That is, could you repeat what China means with this concept? And this is a good question, because of course in Europe, so our meaning, so the meaning of this concept is very different. Yeah. So thank you.
Okay. This principle has been asked by China has been long time, about maybe almost 20 years. So China asks for the international democracy for international relations means that when we talk about international issues, so our nation states are independent actors in United Nations, for example. So when we talk about issues like climate change, we should negotiate, we should talk, we should consult to each other before we come to any conclusion or decision. So that's what the basic means that China trying to argue for this one. So it's very much different from democracy in domestic politics, because China is not a kind of a democracy like inside or United States. So we have very different understanding of democracy. In the European, probably American perception of democracy is that one people have one vote, like what happened today in the United States. One people have one vote. So the United States dislike this concept has been proposed because if in the United Nations, our country have one vote, maybe the United States will lose its influence or power over many issues. But China not argue that democracy is one people, one vote. But we argue that democracy means everything should be talked, should negotiate. We should not simply follow majority. For example, we have vote 50 to 50, and then 51 will set everything. It's not the case. Even if you have 51, you have 80, you cannot. You have majority, you cannot decide everything. Even you have majority, you need to talk to other people, other side, before you come to conclusion. That's why I think we may have this principle has to be very difficult to be understood by the European or American people.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is a question from Eleonora. Of course, it is always better if you can take the mic and pose your question directly to Professor Pan. But okay. Thank you very much. Let's go.
Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for your speech. My question about the end of your speech. Could you repeat what do you think is the way to make the situation between EU and China more cooperative and the relation closer together? Because in this moment we have a lot of misunderstandings, and what China believes is important is in some way misunderstandable for you, even though China has some great ideas, I think, in some points. And so what could bring them closer? That's my question.
Thank you very much for your very good question, and I think it's also very challenging. For the China-EU relations, even I think policymakers have a difficulty, headaches, how we can improve China-EU relations. I think based on my research, I think I'm trying to argue that we should have better understanding. We need to have talk. Even though we cannot face to each other, but we can talk through online. Like the summit between China and EU, we have through the online summit this year. But anyway, it's very important to talk to each other. Because without talk, without exchange of ideas, we don't know what you think and how you think. And you may don't know how I think and what I think. Even over the same issue, we may have different understandings. So misunderstanding, misperception has led to many problems. So if we have more talk, or more negotiation and more consultation, more exchange between people to people, we may have better understanding to each other. So the most important advice I would give to government, to both sides, China and European side, is that we try to have empathy. That means that we try to put ourselves into another side to think about the question. For example, Chinese government should take themselves like they are the European leader to think about the European problem and also the European policies. And the European leader should think about they were the Chinese leader and think about the China issue and understand the China issue. It's very to support each other because, for example, China support European unification or integration, but we hope European Union also support China unification. So I think this is very important reciprocity. And if with this kind of reciprocity, I think we can have very good future for China-EU relations. Nowadays, we have a common issue face both China and EU. That's the pandemic. I think China can grant a lot of help to European side, and European also have a lot of good idea to deal with this issue. So how we should cooperate to each other, how we should deal with this issue together. I think everyone agree. I think probably American people disagree. We should deal with the issue together, not jointly, not single-handed by any country to deal with the issue. But if we agree this principle, I think we have a lot of things to do together. We do research, we develop vaccines, and how we can deal with this issue, and how we can deal with the optimize. So we can think, we can work together on this issue. If we face on this issue, we don't point the finger at each other, then we can have a lot of things to move forward for China-EU relations.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, okay, thank you. And there is a question from Gaetano, who is ready to take the mic, right? Gaetano?
Yes, Professor,
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and contribution. So I would like to ask a foreign policy question. We have seen several problems in humanitarian mission in Africa and Middle East promoted by EU and NATO based on, as you said, the principle of responsibility to protect. And essentially is the attempt to apply liberal institutions and norms with a top-down approach, often not considering the local will and the local sphere and the need of the populations of those countries. So with the China economic expansion to the African continent, do you think in the future EU and China could collaborate together to achieve a more bottom-up approach based on the local needs and values, using a compromise between both EU democratization and human rights principles and China non-interference and sovereignty respect principle together in these interventions? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I think it's a very good question. I mentioned a little bit. So I think China and European have very different principles applied to the Africa. So China follow the 9/11 principle. We don't ask those countries to change their political system before they accept China's aid. But European trying to improve their internal governance by as kind of a precondition to have economic aid and loan to Africa. So we have a different approach. Sometimes European people are not happy with China policy because they believe China's approach is detrimental, is not good to European effort to improve the African countries' good governance. But China believes we should not really interfere into internal affairs. So without precondition for China's aid to Africa, it's very much contradictory to the European policies. But as you ask, I think from my point of view, they are complementary because every country trying to develop themselves, they really depend on foreign aid from Europe, from China. So if they can improve their human rights, democracy, and the political system, that will be definitely good for the country to develop. But this is difficult if this country is so poor. I think China's experience is that it's so poor, it's difficult to have democracy. Many people are very badly educated. They don't know why they need to vote and how to vote. It's very difficult to improve the good governance for this country. So if China can do more to improve education and rural areas development and lift the poverty of this country, and then also the European country can improve the political management and the political system, I think that definitely we can work to help African countries to develop better a model of themselves. instead of European model or China model. I think every country, not necessarily to follow any model. You could find your own model to develop yourself. But China EU, if we don't treat each other kind of a competitor, we can work together to improve situation in many African countries.
Okay, thank you very much. There is another question from George. If I remember well, he cannot use the mic. I'm going to read his question. Why China pushed so much with the 17 plus China platform of investment in Eastern Europe, if at the end no investment and no infrastructural project started?
This I think 16 plus 1 or 17 plus 1 question. Why China has this proposal, and many people, I think many European politicians trying to argue that this is China's approach to divide European. But I will tell you that it's not the true story, because when I was in European Union, to China mission to the European Union, we really want, the China side has been done a lot of effort to promote China EU, not 1+1. China whole, we can work together with the European whole, like China EU, IVTA, or kind of a platform, whatever you call, just China with the whole European Union as a whole. But the European Union are very difficult to come along with China, because European Union has a very strict, high standard precondition to have this effort. And very few European countries agree for this effort. So China trying to have a development of this kind of platform with some countries. I think that was Poland. I suppose that was in 2008 and 2009 when Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao went to Poland to talk about have a kind of a bilateral, or probably a few other countries join, multilateral, more countries to join together, have a kind of work together in this cooperation for co-development between China and some countries in Eastern Europe. So many country leaders, they drive, I think, overnight to come to Poland from Czech, from Republican or Romanian, and then they drive overnight to Poland to see China Premier. They tell Chinese Premier they want to join the program. So that's why I think China will have the program finally, even though some countries are not European member states. But China will be more happy to do with the whole European Union. If the European Union can do that, we would like to do that. But European Union cannot deliver. And I hope we can have cooperation with European countries. So that's why we're seeking plans. Nowadays, we have a grace to join this very important principle. So that's why I think, from China's point of view, it's a good opportunity to develop not only China itself, but also European countries. It's always open to other European member states. Everyone are welcome to join us. Not simply Greece. Every country of European member states can join us. You're welcome. Even the European as a whole are welcome to join this 16+1, 70+1. Even our principal programs like One by One Road or AIIB. So whatever. That's Chinese point of view, Chinese policy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question from Christian. I'm going to read it. So, good evening, Professor. Since EU defined China as a systemic rival, in your opinion, relations between these two actors are going to clash, bringing a sort of a new Cold War between USA, EU, and China models, or is there the possibility for a cooperation despite the rivalry?
This is a more difficult question to answer. People talk about new Cold War between China and the United States, and European, it's difficult to choose inside. So of course, European word said with the United States because you share the same values. But anyway, it's a very difficult choice for any country. We hope we may wish there's no Cold War anymore. No war, never. Cold War between any two countries. We are European side believe China is kind of a systematic rival of European Union, according to the strategic outlook published last year. But I think this is very much about domestic politics. It's not about the international system. The context of the documentation, you will find that it's basically because China represents a socialist political system and European represent a democratic political system. Very different political systems, so that's why we rival to each other. But this not necessarily means that we are rivals like United States or Soviet Union during Cold War period. We are not a systematic rival in that arena, but we have a different political system, so we have a competition. So that's, I think, my understanding over this term. So if we talk about China, EU, US, this triangular relations, I think Donald Trump government, I don't know whether he will win the re-election or not. I suppose he's most likely win the re-election. So we'll know tomorrow or later today in Europe. So probably he will win the re-election. So if Donald Trump have a second term, I think China-US relation will become most likely will become worse to a worse situation. So Donald Trump have a trade war with almost with China, with Europe countries, with Canada, with Mexico, with every country in the world. And United States has quit from Paris agreements. So you may find that China and European Union have more commonalities. We have more agreements. We are both the target of Donald Trump's trade war, and also we are partners over the climate change issue without way to the United States. So we share many things between China and EU, and also we know you share many things between European country and the United States. So if we have Cold War among China, European Union, and the United States, the war will be very, very bad war. So tomorrow will be humid. So we dislike the future scenario to happen. So we can do a lot of things to remove this possibility. So we can work together. For example, China can work along with the European Union to deal with climate change issue, also deal with the trade issue. It's not necessarily China work along with the European Union to fight against the United States, but we can tell the United States which the way is the best way for the United States themselves, and which way is the best for the whole world, and which way is best for the human community. And that's the way we can work together as well to deal with many issues like trade issue, climate issue, and also the pandemic issues, the very important issue we face today. So we may work along for the global governance, and then if we can work together over the global governance over the pandemic issue, for example, we may remove the possibility scenario of Cold War between any two countries in the world. That's my hope. Hopefully, it's not simply waste.
Okay, thank you. There is a question from Yasmin. So nowadays, many countries and organizations denounce a violation of human rights by the Chinese government against ethnic minorities. Can you explain the Chinese government's position and point of view on this issue?
It's about human rights over the minorities. I think China has been a very big country. We have multiple nations or minority groups. We have Han Chinese, a majority of Chinese people are Han Chinese, and besides Han Chinese, we have many minority nations. We have 56 minority ethnic groups. And I think China has been quite good policy, very fair policy, equal policy to every minority groups. For example, we have equal opportunity for education. We have quotas. For example, I'm from Fudan University. So my university will recruit students from 31 provinces. So we don't simply follow the ranking of schools. If that case, the people from Jiangsu, Zhejiang will become majority of Fudan. But we have quotas. For example, every year we have 10 students from Tibet, 10 from Xinjiang, 10 from Liaoning. And probably we have more from Shanghai, like 2,000, because we are located in Shanghai. We need to work with Shanghai local society. That's the case. But outside Shanghai, we have very even division according to population size to different provinces. And this not only Fudan. So we have quite equal policy to every minority, even though they have probably not so good quality of education before Fudan University. So I think this is very much a China's policy, even though many people disagree or not happy with that. But I think it's quite good policy. And by the way, I'm not Han-Chinese. I'm from minority. I'm mature from Liaoning province. So I can tell from my own story that this policy is very good. Without this policy, I cannot become a very good student and then finally become professor to teach here. Without this policy, I cannot do that. For the Chinese people and Chinese government believe the opportunity for good education and opportunity for work, employment is a very important guarantee for human rights. So people living in poor region without education, and you talk to them that you need to have human rights, they don't understand. And from China's point of view, it's meaningless. To make sense, you should improve their living standards. You should improve people's education, and you should improve people's social status. So that's why I think China's minority policy has been quite in line in general policy over human rights. Even though China has been like far behind compared with European side, but China making progress. It's very slow, but China does making progress in human rights records.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Pan, for your speech and for your answers. And we ran out of time already because it's 10:02 or 2:09 in your case. Okay, so thank you very much. We are trying. I think I will try to bring you to Torino next time and to Italy, so that to avoid these technical problems and to ease our interaction and discussion. So thank you very much again, and thank you very much to students, of course, for their questions and for joining this lecture.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you for our students to have so many good questions, challenging questions, and also stay with us for a very long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
from my side.
Yeah. So bye-bye and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.